In this video, we're going to examine the approach that we should use when solving absolute value inequalities. Now, it's very similar to how we would solve compound inequalities and how we would solve absolute value equations. So imagine those two merging together. The first process, again, always just think of it like a process. What do I need to do first when trying to solve an absolute value equality? And it's make sure your absolute value is isolated all by itself. And that's just remove any constants that are being added or subtracted outside of the absolute value bars, remove any coefficients of the absolute value as well for it. And so you want to make sure you isolate it before we convert it to a compound inequality. And that's the next process. We isolate and then we do our converting the absolute value into a compound. And we already covered this in the previous example. If it's less than or equal to, it becomes an and compound equality. If it's greater than or equal to, it becomes an or compound equality. And then once you split that absolute value into those compound equalities, you're really no longer working with an absolute value inequality. You're working with those compounds. So just solve it using the same approach we did. Check your answers as we did before to make sure they yield a true statement, and then graph the solution space. So we've already learned in previous part of this lesson, this series, how to graph and solve compound inequalities. So the only new part, if we were to think about this, is going and doing step 2. Isolating we already did when it came to solving absolute value equations. Solving compound inequalities we already did before. Checking them and graphing them we've already done before. It's this step right here, convert. And so this is where you should focus. Make sure you understand this concept on how to change less than or equal to, and greater than or greater than or equal to absolute value inequalities before we move on to our exercise sets.